Welcome to the Contact Podcast.
Oh yeah, baby.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Contact Podcast. I'm your host, Donovan Jones, coming at you in the same position that I was this time last week. If you listened to the episode last week, you know that I told you guys in my What's Up segment about how we had truck issues at my work where basically we're down several trucks and one of the trucks breaks down and my supervisor tells me, hey, you're going to have to come in late tomorrow because so-and-so has to take your truck. Well, same spot. Wednesday of this week, I'm clocking out. Well, I'm actually doing my paperwork, getting ready to clock out. And my supervisor calls me and he's like, hey, man, you're going to hate me. And I'm like, oh, what you got? What's up? I'm thinking he's going to send me back out like, hey, so-and-so didn't finish their route. Can you go help them? That type of thing. And he's like, go ahead and say it. You're going to hate me. And I'm like, well, let's hear what you have to say, and we'll go from there. And he's like, well, so-and-so's truck broke down. I need you to come in late tomorrow, same as last week. But the difference between last week and this week was like last week, they were able to get the truck fixed for Friday, but this week they weren't able to do that. And so it did affect my Thursday and Friday last week, and it affected my Friday a little bit more today than it did last week because I start on Fridays at midnight. I get up at midnight and I start at 12:30. And the reason that I do that is because I have the first half of my route is so heavy. And so it kind of forces me to really have to try to shift some things around because if I can't get into some of my stops before a specific time, before traffic starts moving, I'll never be able to get in there. And so today was very, very difficult, very draining. The last several weeks have been really since they moved my truck to the other yard. And so if you guys have been listening for a couple weeks, I've told that story about how they moved my truck from one yard to the other. And so if y'all would be praying for me because it's been very mentally draining, and I've been like more tired, more so than usual, obviously, because I'm trying to get used to this schedule of waking up 30 or 45 minutes earlier than I had to before because I'm having to drive further to work and those type of things. And then the last 2 weeks having to really shift my sleep schedule. It's been very draining, but I see that there are things that sometimes we ask God for, and when he gives them to us, we have to realize that this is what we asked for. You know what I'm saying? I've been asking God for more focus. I've been asking God for more testimonies. I've been asking God for more faith building moments. And he's putting me into a position where it's forcing me to have to focus on him, because with all these things going on, I have to choose to look at him instead of the situation that's going on right now. Yeah, it might not be fun. It might not be ideal, but I literally have to fix my eyes on him and say, okay, Lord, I see what's going on here. I'm going to choose to focus on you. This is what I've been praying for. And so it is encouraging in that way to see the Lord answering my prayers in real time, and to just kind of piggyback on what I just said about asking God for more testimonies. Whenever I had Marty on, I guess this would be a week before last, I told him the story about Holvey, and I've told it several times on here. But one thing that I've noticed, I've said it on here before, that the testimonies that we have to push those out in order to receive more. After that episode, and I shared this, I believe I shared this several weeks ago. Y'all gonna have to forgive me because, like I said, I'm running on very little sleep, so I'm trying to focus on what I'm saying here. Like I'm trying to go through, but I'm just gonna put it out there because if I've already said it, it bears repeating just because it goes along with what I'm saying here with this story about Marty. Well, when I told Marty the story about Holvey, at the end of the we recorded, we kind of messaged back and forth. He sent me the album, the unreleased album. I know I shared that on here. He sent me the unreleased album, and what that showed me through that was, through me sharing my testimony with him about the situation with Holvey, it gave me another testimony with him sending me that music, because there's no reason why he should have sent me that music. And for him to tell me, hey, you're one of the only ones that's listened to this project, this unreleased project, it just gave me another testimony. And I'm looking for as many testimonies as I have, because when you're out there in the world and you're talking to people about Jesus and they want to say, well, I don't believe the Bible, I don't believe this, I don't believe that, they cannot dispute what you're saying about things that are happening in your life. And if they can say, oh, well, that's just a coincidence. And you say, well, what about this? Well, that's a coincidence too. Okay, well, what about this situation? I'm seeing all these things. There's no other explanation for what is going on other than God making things happen. And so I'm asking and I'm wanting as many testimonies as God will give me. I don't care what I have to go through. I know that standing on him and standing on his truth and trusting that his way is best and following where he's going, ultimately he's going to give me the strength that I need to pull through this no matter what the season is. And that just doesn't go for me. That's for whoever's listening to this right now. So before I get into anything else, I want to share this really quick. Because my oldest daughter, Finley, if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify, you cannot see it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can. And it's a cross. My daughter went over to her grandparents' house. I guess this was Monday or Tuesday of this week. And when they brought her home that night, I was asleep on the couch and they came in. And Finley woke me up and she was like, "Hey, Dad, I made you this cross. I nailed it together and I painted it and all that stuff." And she's like, "I made it for you for your studio." And so I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to put it yet in here. I'm going to put it somewhere. But I just thought that was very sweet of her to think of her old dad, while she's over at her grandparents' house, eating ice cream and all that kind of stuff. But for her to take the time to nail this together. And they said she nailed it together. She did everything by herself, painted it and all that. And if you could see it, like the crossbar is kind of crooked. And she said she did it like that on purpose because she said, "I feel like Jesus's cross might have been a little bit crooked." And I said, "It could have possibly been. We don't know." But yeah, so I shout out to Finley for making that for me. Like I said, I don't know where I'm going to put it in here, but it's going to go in here somewhere. We'll find a home for it. But we'll just go ahead and call that What's Up. We'll just go ahead and say that was the What's Up segment. I know that was a little bit longer. So yeah, we'll just call that What's Up.
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?
So I usually don't do the music at the end of the segment, but we're going to do things a little bit differently today, and that's okay. This topic that I want to talk about today, and it's funny because the title is Sorry I Don't Have My Phone. And kind of the backstory behind that is for the last couple of weeks, I was saying going into my vacation, which I'm on vacation next week, I said, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing that I did last year. And last year, I don't know if anybody who's listening to this has been following me since last year. When we went on vacation, I turned my phone completely off. The only time that I got on was once during my whole, week vacation. And that was to post the links on my Facebook and my Instagram for the episode that had dropped that Monday. But for the rest of the time, I was off. I was completely unplugged. And it's so funny because I'm talking about unplugging. I'm talking about not having the phone, but yet I'm putting it on social media. I'm putting it on YouTube. So like, if you're listening to this or watching this right now, you're probably listening on your phone. It's kind of like an oxymoron. Like I'm saying, hey, unplug, but watch this, And so, but I just think it's so essential. I've been talking to so many people lately that have been talking about they're feeling like they're exhausted. They're feeling like they're tired. They're feeling like they're mentally and physically drained. And I'm in that space right now. And I'm just excited to get a week off to where I can completely, just kind of disassociate myself from everything except my family and just focus on them and hanging out with them. And we usually go to Florida every year for vacation, but this year, we're just going to stay around Chattanooga. We had to do some upgrades and stuff to the house this year. Obviously we got, I've talked about it several times, the studio, obviously that we've built here in the house. And so we did several other things to the house. And so because of that, we're like, let's just save a little bit of money instead of going to Florida this year. We'll just hang around Chattanooga. And, Kelly's parents have built a house down on the river. So we're going to go stay down on the river. We're going to do some fun things, but just time together. And I said, you know what? I think I really needed this too, because when you go somewhere like Florida, you kind of feel obligated to make sure you're packing as much as you can into that short time, because you're like, I got to take advantage of this because we're only here in Florida for a week. And, so it's going to be cool just to kind of sit back and relax and just hang out. Cause I think since me and Kelly have been together, and we've been together 9 years, there's probably only been maybe 2 or 3 years that we did not go to Florida. And if we didn't, we went to Gatlinburg or we went somewhere. So this is the first year that we've actually just stayed at home for vacation. And so I'm looking forward to it because there's not going to be that significant drive. It's just going to be chill, like relaxing, hanging out with the family. So I'm super excited about that, because when you're doing a work for God, Satan is going to try to do everything that he can to hinder you from doing that, right? Like we've talked about that before. If you're a Christian, you've experienced some sort of spiritual warfare, but you know what I'm talking about. Well, I heard a pastor say this one time that if Satan can't get in front of you and stop you, he's going to get behind you and push you. He's going to try to get you to speed up. He's going to try to get you to miss opportunities, miss things that God is doing in and around your situation, testimonies. He's going to try to push you to get you overwhelmed, to get you discouraged, to get you to ultimately to the point where you're saying, God, why are you putting all of this on me? Well, like I said about my situation, isn't this what you asked for? Like, God, like, if you have given up ownership to God and you're asking him, reveal to me my purpose so that I might follow it through your strength. He's going to bring the trials and the tribulations and the things like, well, I guess not trials and tribulations. I guess you'd call them the testings, because God doesn't tempt, God tests. And so, he's going to bring those tests to you to build your faith, to strengthen you so you're ready to face whatever it is that he has for you ultimately. And Satan wants to keep you from getting to that place. So he wants to try to push you. He wants to try to speed you up. He wants to try to get you feeling overwhelmed and drained, because when you're in that place, you can't pour into other people if you're on E. And so I want to look in several different places today to kind of talk about this, because when we look at the creation story, the first thing that God kind of did for man, other than creating the world and everything like that, is he called him to rest. And we're going to look at that and back that up in scripture here in a moment. But before we do that, I want to look in Mark chapter 1. If you follow along with your Bible, Mark chapter 1, verse 35, and it's talking about Jesus here. And it says, and rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, everyone is looking for you. And he said to them, let us go on to the next town, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came. So even Jesus modeled that for us, that getting along with God, unplugging from everybody else, because throughout Jesus's entire ministry, there's people flocking to him. There's constantly people bringing the sick and the demon possessed and all of those type of things. People wanting to hear him speak, people wanting to hear what he had to say about the kingdom of God and the new way to be human and all of those things. And Jesus is showing us, modeling for us here, you need to unplug and get away with the Father. Yes, Jesus said, I am here to preach. That is why I'm here. But in order for me to fulfill while I'm here, I have to get alone with the Father. I have to get alone and talk to him in a desolate place by myself. And that is the model for us. That is what God is showing us and calling us to do. Get alone with him. All right, so let's flip over to the very first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created him, male and female, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Chapter number 2, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all of the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God created man on sixth day. He invited man to rest in his finished work on the seventh day with him. Because we see in the next chapter, after that day of rest, he calls all the animals to Adam, and he says, whatever man decides to call this animal, that's what it's going to be. And we see that's where the work began for Adam. But first, it's rest in the finished work that God has done. And so that's kind of where I want to encourage you to go today. Not be lazy, not to be complacent of the things that you need to get done, but to just sometimes take moments to enjoy the finished work of God, creation, salvation, forgiveness, grace, mercy, all these things. Rest in those moments. You don't have to be going all the time. This world's going to keep spinning whether or not you're doing a specific thing. And so, like I said, this episode is going to be a little bit different because, like I said, I am very tired. I am very drained. And so hopefully this stuff is making sense to you guys. Like, I've been praying over this episode because this is one that I've been thinking about for a while. And as soon as I thought about it, one of the first places that I thought to look in scripture was the story of Elijah. And I've been wanting to do this kind of topic, this specific text for probably about a year, but I just couldn't figure out a time to plug it into an episode. And I felt like God was telling me this is the time to do it. And so for a little backstory here, we're going to go to 1 Kings chapter 16, the latter part of chapter 16. And we're going to look at several different verses here in 16 and 17 and 18. But ultimately, I want to get to the latter part of 19. because I think there's a lot in there that has to do with this idea of resting in what God has and just unplugging and being quiet and listening. Because one thing that happens when we start moving too quickly as well is we start seeing things that aren't there. We start hearing things that aren't there. We start getting in a false perception of things and not really focusing on what God has around us, what God has called us to do. And so if you look in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse number 29, it says, in the 28th year of, I think it's Asa, king of Judah, Ahab the son of Omri began to reign over Israel. And Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all of the kings who were before him. In verse number 32, it says he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal. And then at the end of verse number 33, it says, Ahab did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So because of this, Elijah comes into the scene in chapter number 17. And I love how it introduces him. Now Elijah. It just laid out how Ahab has done more. He's provoking God. He's done more evil than any other king. And it says, now Elijah. And Elijah tells him basically, and I'm not going to read it all word for word, but just a little bit of context here before we get to where we're wanting to land in the terms of rest and in terms of unplugging, in terms of just being silent and waiting for God to speak to you. The Lord tells him, go speak to him. So Elijah goes and stands before him and he says, there's not going to be any rain unless I say there's going to be rain. He says, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word. So after this, he goes and the Lord draws him out to a desolate place, again, quiet, away from everybody else. He says, depart from here, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the brook of Cherith, which is east of Jordan. Which is funny because we talked about the Jordan River a couple of weeks ago with Naaman, and it kind of connects with, ultimately Elijah is preceded by Elisha, who Elisha, through God's power, told Naaman to go down to the Jordan River. Maybe you guys could tell I'm really tired today, so bear with me, forgive me. I'm a little bit embarrassed because I am so tired, but the Lord tells him to go depart. He said, you shall drink from the brook and I will command ravens to feed you there, which is very funny because ravens were considered unclean. So the Lord is literally providing him food through an unclean source, through a source that Elijah was probably even thinking like, why ravens? Why is the Lord choosing ravens to bring me food? And so it's just funny the way that God can use things that we might say, well, isn't this unworthy, or isn't this something that is considered unclean, but yet you're using it to provide for me what I need to continue, what I have to have sustenance to survive, like you're using this. And so nothing is out of the realm of possibility for God. So do not push anything away as saying God cannot use this to further my walk, to further my ministry. And that does not mean just go seeking things that are sinful, seeking none of those types of things. I'm just saying, don't put limits on God that he cannot use any and every situation. That's all I'm trying to say. And so let's go now to chapter number 18. So basically, if you know this story of Elijah, he comes back before Ahab. It's been several years now. And when Ahab sees him, he says, it is you trouble of Israel. And Elijah says back to him, I have not troubled Israel, but you have in your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed Baal. And so basically he says, let's have a showdown. I want you to get your prophets of Baal. I want you guys to meet me on Mount Carmel. I'm going to build an altar. You guys are going to build an altar, and we're going to see whose God strikes fire down on our offering. And I love how it says here in verse number 24 of chapter 18, he says, you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. He's like, you could call your little gods that I know are nothing. They're not even there. They don't exist. They're make-believe. They're figments of your imagination. You call on your gods, and I will call upon the Lord to come through in this situation and to show all of you who he is in this moment. He tells them, okay, you guys go first. So they start dancing around their altar. They start cutting themselves. They start asking Baal, strike this altar and those type of things. And it says at noon, Elisha started mocking them and making fun of them. he said, cry louder, for he is a God. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is just on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. So keep going louder. And so I think that's one thing that, this is kind of a side note here, but there are some things that I think as Christians, we feel like we can't make fun of, like, and I'm trying to, phrase this the right way. There are some things that we just need to call out as ridiculous. And I don't have to go into great detail of that, but there are some things that are maybe posted on social media or people that you interact with, and you feel like you have to use kid gloves because it's like, oh, well, I don't want to offend. Well, sometimes we're just supposed to call things goofy that are goofy. You know what I mean? Some things that are so out of order, so out of line of what God has created. Sometimes we just need to call it. And that's what Elijah was doing here. So follow the example of Elijah. He's making fun of him. He's saying, hey, maybe your God is using the bathroom. He's like, cut yourself more, dance harder. So then obviously nothing happens. Baal does not come through for them. And I think what's very telling about this situation and the faith that Elijah had in God, and what we're going to see it dwindle in a second. Verse number 33, remember they're in a drought. So they have not had water for several years now. He tells them, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And they did it. And he said, do it a second time. So that's 8 jars of water. They need water right now. They're lacking water. They did it a second time. He said, do it a third time. So that's 12. They did it a third time. And the water ran all around the altar, and the trench was also filled with water. And at the time of the offering, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that these people may see that you, O Lord, are God, and that they have turned their hearts back, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord is God. And Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape. And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook and slaughtered them there. So Elisha was like that dude. Like, not only did he have the faith in God, but he's like, you know what? Let's bring them down here. I'm going to kill them myself. He kills all these prophets of Baal. And so then he goes up to meet Ahab. When he goes up to meet Ahab, he says, go up and eat and drink. This is verse number 41 of chapter 18. He says, go up and eat and drink, for there's the sound of rushing rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elisha went up to the Mount Carmel, and he bowed himself down on the earth and put his face between his legs. I've heard a preacher talk about this before, where the posture that he was in, it was almost like birthing pains. Like he was pushing out this prayer, like he's praying, God, okay, I've just seen you move here. I need you to bring the rain right now. Like, I know you told me at my word, but now I'm saying this is the time. But he was so he was praying so hard that he had that posture of his head between his legs. He's pushing out this prayer. He's going to continue to pray and persevere and until the Lord brings what he's asking for. So he tells the man that's with him, go up and see if he saw anything. The man says, no, there's nothing. He says, go up again. He says, there's nothing. He says, go up 7 times. And at the 7th time, he said, behold, a little cloud like a man's hand is rising from the sea. And he said, go up and say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, lest the rain stop you. So this is another part that's crazy as well. He tells the man, go get in your horse and buggy and go back so you can beat the rain, right? And in a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he gathered up his garment and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So through the power of the hand of God on him, this guy has already left in a horse and chariot, and Elijah on foot just pulls up his cloak and just takes off running and beats the dude on horse through the power of God. So we've seen 2 examples right here where Elijah has seen the hand of God move mightily in his life. Well, actually 3, because of the rain. So you see the rain, you see the altar, the offering, the burnt offering, and now you're seeing the Lord allowing him to physically outrun a horse and buggy, and the guy has already left ahead of him. So I want to encourage you in this moment, because this is where we're going to get to being still. And this is where we're going to get to unplugging. And this is where we're going to get into being quiet and waiting for God to speak into your situation. Because when we're in the midst of a trial, it's easy to forget these testimonies that we've had that built our faith. Chapter 19, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and that he had killed the prophets with a sword. Then Jezebel sent a message saying, Elijah saying, so may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of them by this time tomorrow. So she's threatening him with his life and saying, by this time tomorrow, you're going to be dead. So this terrifies Elijah to the point where he flees. First of all, God has called him to minister where he is at. But instead, he's fleeing because he is, in his mind, in this moment, having more fear of man than he has fear of God, and letting that fear of man take over the faith building moments that he has just experienced through the power of God. And so he goes and he hides. It says in verse number 9, he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So I want you to listen to these next words, because these are very crucial to this story and grasping what I feel like is needed in this text. I know we're doing a lot of reading today, but I think every single passage that we're reading is essential to understanding the importance of getting alone and unplugging and not focusing on the things of this world, not fearing man more than we fear God, not all of those things, just focusing on hearing from God. Verse number 11, and he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains, and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. Some translations might say, or a sound, a thin silence. I like that, a thin silence. Because I think sometimes we're expecting that earthquake. We're expecting that loud wind. We're expecting that whatever it is, the fire. We're expecting the big and the outrageous and just the insane. But it's that thin silence. It's that being quiet with God. I know there's so many times in my life where I've prayed to God and I'm like, God, make it rain right here, and that way I'll know. You know what I mean? There's times where we do that in our own lives. Lord, let 5 red cars pass me here on the interstate, and I'll know what you want me to do. You know what I mean? Like those type of things. We want those grandiose signs from God, but it's really that thin silence of just being quiet. Sometimes it just takes just shutting up for 5 minutes and just listening and saying, okay, God, what would you have me to hear from you in this moment? Like, speak to me in that thin silence. All these things are possible for us to do because James talks about Elijah was a man with the same nature as us. Like these people that we read in the Bible, yes, God did use them in amazing ways, but you have that same type of access to God. Like you at any moment can pray and talk to God. You at any moment can ask God to speak into your situation, and he's going to do that. So a low whisper, and then verse number 13, and when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here? So this is the second time that God's asked this. What are you doing? And then Elijah answers him the exact same way. I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And the Lord said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael, I'm horrible at these names, to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abela, can't even pronounce this name, you shall anoint to be the prophet in your place. And the one who escapes from the sword of Hazael shall Jehu put to death, and the one who escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha put to death. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Several different things. There's a lot in that passage, but the fact that Elijah would not let go of that fear, He was just so intimidated by what Jezebel was saying she was going to do to him. And he's saying, I am here alone. They've gotten rid of everybody else. I'm the only one here that's serving the Lord. And God replies back to him, what are you doing here? A second time. And he just comes back with the same thing. He will not let it go. And God ultimately says to him, okay, come down here. There are 7,000 in the land of Israel that I'm going to show you. You're not alone. You've allowed your circumstances to overcome the faith that you have in me, to overcome all that you have seen me do for you just in this past little bit. You've allowed those things to take over your mind and to control you to a place of fear and hiding and trembling instead of trusting me that I'm going to provide for you, just like I did in front of all those false prophets of Baal. Just like I did when I allowed you to go in front of Ahab and say, there's going to be no rain unless I speak the word. And then he tells him, you know what? I'm going to anoint someone in your place. And it's going to be Elisha. So he departs from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him. And he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him, cast his cloak upon him, which was a sign of saying, you're going to follow me. You're going to basically take over the reins of what I'm doing. And so just to kind of paraphrase the rest of this chapter here, because there's only a couple of verses, but getting alone with God not only is monumental for your situation, but it affects other people as well. Because in the silence, in finally listening to that thin silence, not the tornado, not the hurricane, not the earthquake, not the fire, none of those things, but that thin silence was when God could speak to him and not only speak into his situation, but also had an effect on somebody else's, Elisha. And so as he goes to him and tells him, puts his cloak over him, Elisha says, let me go tell my parents I'm leaving. And he kills these oxen and he feeds the people that are around him. That's very significant because he's saying, I know I'm not coming back to this. This was where I was at, but I'm killing where I was and I'm blessing the people around me with what I have sacrificed. I'm done with that life. Now I'm on to the next. But that would have never been experienced had Elijah not heard that thin silence. Because God not only spoke into his situation, but it had an effect on Elisha as well. That thin silence where God is trying to speak to you, sometimes that can have an effect on other people as well. Because that's what it's all about, like community. And it says when we look in Genesis, I didn't read it, but a second ago when we were looking in there, one of the verses that precedes where we're talking about how the Lord gave Adam the ability to name all the animals, whatever he wanted to name them. One of the things that God said in there was, it is not good for man to be alone. And I know in that instance, he's talking about he needed a partner, Eve, but I believe you can also take that a step further and say, just in relationships, friendships, community, and those type of things, it's not good for people to be by themselves. And so, that's what it's all about, building each other up, connecting with each other, praying for each other. Paul says in Colossians 4 verses 2-4, pray for me for opportunities, for doors to be open for me. And also, while you're doing that, give thanks and asking God for opportunities for yourself. So it's not just about asking for opportunities for yourself, but praying that God would open the door for other people as well. And so that's just what it's all about. That's where we need to be as human beings. That's where we need to be as followers of Christ, just trying to encourage other people to keep going as well. But then just to kind of wrap all of this in a bow, it's so easy sometimes to fear the circumstances that are around us and not look at what God is doing in the midst of our situations. And so it's best sometimes just to get, in a desolate place, just to get in a quiet place, even if you have to wake up 30 or 45 minutes earlier than you're used to doing, or maybe going to bed 30 or 45 minutes later than you're used to going to bed. Whatever you need to do to get that time away from God, just to be in the silence and say, God, here I am, speak to me. Let me hear that thin silence in this moment. Be able to hear what you have to say in this moment, and let me be able to receive it, and let me be able to understand it. Lord, I'm here. And so, man, I don't know. This one was rough. I'm not going to lie. I think this is episode 117. I want to say this was like the hardest one, like mentally, because I am so drained. So y'all y'all pray for me. I'm gonna get some sleep. I'm not, recording anything next week at all. I've already got, 2 weeks worth of episodes. And so we're just gonna, hang out next week with my family. When this comes out, this will actually come out the Monday after our vacation. So I'll give you guys an update how it went. But until next time, I love you guys. I thank you so much for all of your support. Each and every one of you guys who listen every single week. I don't know how you put up with my voice every single week, but I'm thankful for you. Everyone who comments on YouTube, everybody who likes the videos, everybody who is sharing this, everybody who reaches out to me and sends me words of encouragement on my Instagram and on my Facebook. I truly, truly am grateful for y'all. And if you have any prayer requests or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to pray for you. God bless you guys. Have a great week.